Hi there, it's Polly here. Mr. Snoots. So, I played a role-playing game recently and really enjoyed it. Wasn't sure I was going to. Advanced Fighting Fantasy. Now, there's the beast of a thing. So, this is based on the Fighting Fantasy books. These, by the way, were not part of my personal gaming background. I was too old for those. Those are basically kids' books, really, that came out long after I'd finished university and was out working as a pro game designer. But for a lot of the younger generation, not the current generation, but the younger generation, these were like a really important thing. They're people's first introduction to role-playing games and adventure gaming. These are like major juju for these people. They love it. So this is a game system based on those books. But it was an interesting experience for me because for me, it had absolutely zero nostalgia value at all. I don't know those books, so I came at it fresh, able to enjoy it or not enjoy it simply as the game itself. And I found it's a really good game. I really liked it. And the thing I liked about it was it's a simple system that covers everything you need, but it's a simple system, and therefore you play the game and you don't game the system. And when you do that, that's when you get the best out of a role-playing game. Let the stupid superpowers and escalating feats go, and you just play a game. And you engage with the world that the umpire's throwing at you, and you're not having to worry about checks and balances and whatever. Fantastic game. So, what I've got here, what I have here is the deluxe version. Now, this is from Drive-Thru, but the main publisher also has these, but this is a collection actually of 3 books under one cover. And it does show that it actually just is 3 books under one cover, so there's some repeated information some between them. And you can also get some things like combat companions and magic companions that give you more spells and these sorts of things. This guy here, he likes collecting all that sort of crap. I blame him. But anyway, how the game works. Simply, it is a 2d6 system. Now, you have really not that many characteristics. So you have a stamina. That is how strong, how tough, how much damage you can take, how much you are, etc. You have another characteristic, which is skill. That is used for doing things, be it stabbing someone with a sword or using a spell or spotting for traps, whatever. Those are all skill rolls. You have another one, which is luck. Now, luck is an interesting thing because you can be asked to take a luck test. And every time you take a luck test, your luck goes down by 1. So it's a resource that you can burn. Luck also has other uses. More on that later. If you have a character that can use magic, you also gain magic points, which are used to track your spell use. Casting a spell costs you magic points, which have to be removed from your magic points total. That's really it for characteristics. What you do is you are given a starting value for stamina, for skill and luck, and you get some points that you can split up between them. Each point, you get I think it's 8 points to split between them, but each point that you put into stamina actually gets you 2 stamina points, and you can only raise each one by a certain amount. Or you can take those points and you can put them into magic. So everyone gets a cool trait of some kind, and that could be things from being, hawk-eyed or an amazing shot with a bow, or you're amazing at cheating death, or you're a great lockpicker, or you're an incredible accurate, or all these sorts of things that you can choose. A swashbuckler, a natural magician, so you don't have to make skill rolls to use spells that are equal to your current skill level or less, etc. Then you get specific skills that you can take. Now, you get skill points. I think you start off with 3 skills that are at level 2 and 6 skills that are at level 1. To make a test of a characteristic in the initial system, you're rolling 2 dice and you've got to get the value or less. So if I have a skill of 7, I've got to roll 2 dice and get a 7 or less for a skill to work. If I'm in combat and I'm trying to stab my opponent, good. I have a skill of 7, good. I have to roll a 7 or less. But the skills, specific skills that I've bought, add to my skill characteristic. So if I took level 2 skill in use of sword and I'm having a sword fight with someone, if my skill is 7, I add 2 to it because I'm using a sword and I have a skill in sword, so I actually need a 9 or less, is how that works. Combat, very simple really. There is a little bit of record keeping this. Each weapon doesn't use a straight dice for damage. Everything rolls a d6 and there are different damage values given depending on what was rolled on the dice. So a sword, and you actually record 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 because some things give you a +1 on damage. So a sword might do 2, 3, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5, 6 points of damage, something like that, depending on the roll. Daggers will do less, etc. If you hit someone, you roll, see what damage, that will go on the enemy, that comes off their stamina. However, they get a chance to block some of it. Your armor also has a little chart that you roll on like that, and it will block damage that you take and remove it. You can also have a dodge characteristic, a dodge skill. You can roll on dodge instead of armor. It's not wildly efficient, but it at least removes some of the damage, and the higher your dodge skill, the more damage it removes. Which is a pretty good thing if you happen to be something like a wizard or a thief. Now, the thing I like about this is it's more logical than D&D. There's not just the hand-waving, oh, because. So, armor has like an encumbrance that goes with it. It comes off skill rolls for things that involve any sort of agility or gesturing or whatever, including casting magic spells. You can absolutely wear a suit of plate armor and cast all the magic you want, but there is a negative on your skill roll to do so. So if magic tossing is going to be your main thing, you might not want to do something that gives you a huge skill penalty on that. Mr. Snoots would probably say dump that stuff and invest in some dodging. So it's a pretty simple way of getting a character, but it gives you some pretty flavoursome characters because you've made those choices of what skills to have and what trait to take. And there's a nice little write-up there in how to kind of just flesh out theatre of the mind, where you're from, what you are, how you fit into the world. There is a pretty extensive system in here for turning any intelligent creature into a character should you wish to play it. So if you look through and you decide, yeah, I want to be a troll, right, they've actually got a formula to figure out how to do it. And what that will often mean is if it's got lots of traits and so on of its own, this thing can see in the dark, this thing can regenerate, this thing is particularly strong, etc. It's got natural armor and so on. You're not going to have many skills. It's really going to chew into the number of skills that you can do, and you won't be choosing traits. The traits are already in the creature. But all those options are there. If you want to play a Rhino Man, if you feel like a Mantis Man is going to be your thing, you can do it. So again, very simple tools, very flexible. I will say these rules are almost a first blush. They need some editing. There's a couple of typos in them, but there's some stuff. It's hard to find some things, like how many spells you get to start with. I'm playing in a game of this at the moment, and suddenly it comes up, how many spells do I get? 3 or 4 people pouring through the books could not find how many spells a starting character gets. We looked online and found many different answers with people saying, yeah. So it was obviously in the books, in the Fighting Fantasy books, where you could be a magic user. It said, oh yeah, choose X spells from this thing, or your character knows the following, but it hasn't flipped over into this. So there's some errors in design here, which has come from a presumption that you know the previous material. No, this is a standalone, and you'll get people like me who have not played those books. So what this game does is it builds out all of this in the first section. This is the basic rules for Advanced Fighting Fantasy, if that's a thing. It's got pretty simple monster notations and everything. And it covers, riding and climbing and races and how to gain extra talents. And there's some interesting things. Now, there's a system I really like. They've got a dungeon generator. And I really like this. Take a piece of paper and you take a fistful of dice and you roll them on the paper. Those are the locations. Those are the rooms, the caves, whatever. The number that's come up in a D3 sense is the number of access points into the room. So if it's a 1 or 2, it's got 1 access point. 3 or 4, 2. 5 or 6, it's got 3. You draw lines that then link these together so that you can make basically a map of how everything sort of logically fits together. So it's a really nice random dungeon generator, and it can be used basically for any sort of random location thing. You could use it for any kind of hex crawly, wander through the wilderness, wander through the barrows, wander through the hills, locations in a city, anything like that. And they've got randomizers here for generating what's in there, what creatures, what rewards, what traps, and so on. So you can do a nice random generation system. Great, fantastic. It's set in the world of Titan, which is, again, familiar to those folk from the actual books. What the rest of this book does is brings you the world of Titan. So the additional stuff they've got here is a huge section. The whole last section is the world of Titan. Lore obviously built through all the Fighting Fantasy books. So they're going to run down on all of the locations from those books, which did flesh out a world. So they have got cities and ports and continents and kingdoms and areas, and these are all described here in full. So it does give you a whole world, gives you laws about trolls and goblins and who they are and what they are and what's going on and why they hate things. The middle section is from the book, I think it's from the Pit, which was largely descriptions of monsters. So the middle section is a pretty detailed monster compendium. Look, many of the usual suspects, of course, are here, but there's an atomic buttload of monsters here. I think it's 250 monsters or something. And some of these are very, very different from D&D monsters. So D&D players, be warned, things are different here. This isn't another thing that just carbon copies D&D. These monsters are very much their own thing. Because it's come from a fighting fantasy book, you can see a lot of it is pointed at fighting. There's not a lot of things here that just want to be your friend, but what the hell, it's a monsters book. But yeah, this place definitely has its own flavour. These monsters definitely do their own thing. It's not D&D, and there's a lot of things here that are a real surprise. And there's some things, again, that I think suffer a little bit from the original books, in that it was obviously meaningful stuff in one of these book adventures, but they've just taken what it did in the book and it doesn't translate well into a big world. So I've got a thing like a mantis man. This thing sits there and it can just lash out and just kill things. And I would say it's got the feel of something that's set up as a monster somewhere in a book, and it's hard to approach, because if you approach, you can just do this, but it doesn't give you much more information beyond that in this book. What is it? Why is it standing there? Okay, that's its attack, but how does it fight when it's not ambushing you? These sorts of things, which we're intelligent adults, we can flesh it out for ourselves, but that is a bit of a thing. The combat companion here, I had it recommended to me as being useful. What it really does is it gives you some more templates. It gives you some extra skills, some extra talents. It brings in some stuff that I think is thoroughly unnecessary, like martial arts for characters. I don't really think that's a necessary thing. And it does bring you in some new equipment. So of some use, if you're going to play the game, do pick it up. And there's a expanded magic one as well, which does have a ton more spells. A thing I've liked about the spells is they're not unbalancing spells. There's not that D&D thing where suddenly you go from doop-be-doop-be-doo, I can't do much except whatever, you summon an unseen servant, and suddenly you're flinging lightning bolts down a corridor. There's none of that. You can pick virtually any magic you want. It's just that the more damaging or more powerful a spell, the more magic points it's going to cost you. And if it's if you've bought a talent for being like a sorcerer, a natural born kind of magician, then things that have a power cost higher than your skill, you have to roll to activate the spell. So, okay, so you might want to limit yourself in getting those really big, powerful spells. But there's lots of utility spells, but there's not many world-changing spells. So a magician character is not something that dominates the game. You just have a different set of tools that do some really cool and interesting and amazing and useful things, but you are not, and you're certainly not really climbing to the heights where you go, meteor swarm, and that town ends. It's like, yeah. So I've been playing a magic user, and it's been interesting. Now, they've got a few different types of magic. There's basically sort of a common magic. It's not wildly useful, but lots of people can do it. It's little spells that just help out daily life. It can be stuff that just makes someone feel a bit more attracted to someone or to you. Or it can be the ability to push something or heat something or make someone make a mistake if they're doing something that's a little bit complex and they're not doing things, or make someone fall over, or these kind of minor annoyancy things. You can make it light in here. You can light that candle from a distance. You can repair that clothing, etc. So useful stuff. And then there's wizardry, which is spells that you've learned, and there's a considerable kind of lexicon of spells there. There's sorcery, where you pick a couple of spells and you just know them by rote. There's also priestly magic. There's a considerable list of different gods here, and the priestly thing is different again. You can use it, each character is granted different powers depending on the god they worship, and you can use those powers only once per day each. So you have to be careful with how you do them. So again, this isn't a game we've got a cleric wandering around behind someone going, "Yeah, healing spell, yeah, healing spell, yeah, healing spell." That infinite resource world of D&D is gone. You are going to have to manage your resources and have a think about it. It's got very clear, simple rules for everything, for encumbrance, for experience, all these things. Your characters will get better. So, like I said, it's a simple, robust set of rules that manage to define a character without having to have a slew of characteristics. It just boiled down to how robust am I, what's my general level of skill, how lucky am I, how many reserves of magic points do I have, and what are my specific skills that give me bonuses in specific situations or with specific tools. The luck thing, by the way, so if you are trying to see if you avoid, the pit trap, or you avoid the avalanche thundering towards you, that is often a luck test. You make the roll, you've got to roll your luck or less, but every time you are forced to make a luck check, your luck is temporarily reduced by 1. So it is a finite resource that you will burn through over the course of an adventure. You get it back at the end of the adventure. So use it carefully. No, I'm taking a short rest and my resources come back. Nah, not here, Bihach. You have to actually watch these resources. You can also burn luck points to do things like reduce someone else's damage roll to you just to a 1, or make someone's dice roll that succeeded fail, or make one of your own failed dice rolls get a re-roll, that sort of thing. So again, it is an adventure resource that you can use to progress through the adventure. And as far as experience goes, it's the most difficult one to increase because you seem to not buy it with experience points. It is actually awarded to you for doing mighty deeds and finishing adventures. Essentially the gods are smiling upon you, you've become luckier, so the umpire is handing it to you as an award. So look, that very simply is the game. There is a science fiction version of this that I'm going to do as a separate review because it is a separate game and has a few separate mechanisms and so on, and deserves a review of its very own. But I've played 3 or 4 games of this now and have really enjoyed it. Clearly, it is designed for that most simple, elemental level of play. You walk in here, here's these enemies you face, you fight them, it's got 200 gold pieces in the bag, move on. Because that was a lot of the elements of the books, all right? But that strength of the simple game system, and what I keep coming back to, of playing the game, not gaming the system, means that the game system is nigh invisible, which actually lends itself to that higher, dizzier, and more rewarding level of role-playing play, where you forget about the game system almost entirely and you're playing an adventure. So it frees you up to not do a game that's just about combat and so on, and get out there and solve those conundrums, solve those mysteries, follow those clues, explore those amazing lands, discover those lost cities, make first contact with those strange things. You can do all of that because it frees you to move away from a combat-oriented, simplistic set of combat rules stitched into a role-playing experience, and actually immerse yourself in a world and in an actual adventure. So simple rules can make a better game. If you're a game designer, pay heed. Anyway, that is Advanced Fighting Fantasy. Like I said, incredibly meaningful stuff to a lot of people, but I came to it blank, never having opened one of the Fighting Fantasy books, and really enjoyed this. To an extent that when we were starting off a new fantasy game, this was the game we chose. Out of all the things that we could have done, it's like, let's do this. Yeah. So, well worth a look at. And very obviously, it has an atomic ton of campaigns and setting material available for it. So this is really well supported over many, many years of writing. So you will find a ton of material of this for your gaming pleasure. So, anyway, that's our thoughts on Advanced Fighting Fantasy, Mr. Schnoots, and Gunnar the Insane. Thoroughly approve of it. Cheers, everyone. I hope to see you all around the gaming table sometime soon. Look after yourselves. Bye. He wants to push it again.